Hey guys, it's Ornlu, and we are back with another Three Kingdoms DLC/live patch testing video, going over the regional units that are available in-game and will also be further available in the upcoming Three Kingdoms expansion. And this video is going to be about the most complex unit in the game, the Chuan warship. I think a lot of you guys might have even missed it, because right now in the game it is only available to the Chinese. But it will also be in the upcoming expansion available to the Jurchens plus the Three Kingdoms, so Wu, Wei, and Shu. So this video is going to be going about, okay, what on earth does this unit do? How does it work? What are its stats? Which, trust me guys, was very hard to figure out. But I think we have at least a decent grip on it at this point. And then, of course, cover how does it stack up to its compatriots, the Cannon Galleon and the Drummond, because this is still your basic Cannon Galleon replacement for the 5 civilizations that will have this unit. And how do they stack up relative to these two units? What are they good against? How are they better or worse than these two units? And I guess what makes them tick, especially for the individual civilizations that have bonuses for them. So that's what this is going to be about, guys. Get ready for a lot of very confusing statistics, because, yeah, oh boy, here we go. So, like I said, this is a Cannon Galleon replacement, so it is available only in the Imperial Age. But unlike the Drummond, or I guess like the Drummond, but unlike the Cannon Galleon, you do not need chemistry to get this unit. You just need Imperial Age. So already that's a pretty big point in favor of the Chuan, because Cannon Galleons require chemistry, then you need to get the Elite Cannon Galleon on top of it for a lot of civs, so that is already so much more hassle than for this unit. When it comes to the price tag, though, that is pretty rough. The Chuan is now the most expensive unit in the game outside of the hero units. So 250 wood and 225 gold for the Chuan, and it says powerful siege warship that fires arrows at units and uses a long-range trebuchet weapon against buildings and siege weapons, but cannot attack at close range. Strong versus buildings and weak versus fire ships. So if we compare that 250 wood, 225 gold cost to, let's see here, the Byzantines who get Drummonds, the Drummond is way cheaper, 175 wood and 150 gold. And then the Cannon Galleon is going to be in between at 200 wood and 150 gold. So the Chuan is the most expensive by far, costing a full 50 wood and 75 more gold than a Cannon Galleon. So very expensive. However, I will say that cost efficiency, like long-term cost efficiency, isn't really something that matters for the siege ships, because you only train, I don't know, what, 5 to 10 a game usually whenever they're played at all. So it's, in my opinion, less about like, oh, okay, how do these ships perform in mass versus other groups of units, and more about how good are these units individually and how fast can you get them out. So although the Chuan costs a lot of resources, you can at least get the unit quite quickly. Now, going over their stats relative to the Cannon Galleons and Drummonds. Starting with HP, 175 HP for the Chuan, 125 for the Drummond, and 150 for the Cannon Galleon. So the Drummond, the least HP, Cannon Galleon in the middle, and the Chuan with the most, so that at least reflects the increasing costs of those units. When it comes to movement speed, the Drummond has 1.2, the Cannon Galleon has 1.10, and the Chuan kind of splits the difference at 1.15, so faster than a Cannon Galleon, but slower than a Drummond. When it comes to attack speed, we have a reload time of 8 for the Drummond, 10 for the Cannon Galleon, and 5 for the Chuan. So this is one of the biggest strengths of the unit, and why it has a very high DPS, as we'll get to in a little bit. It attacks very fast relative to the other siege warships in the game. The downside, though, is that there is no blast damage associated with this unit, like there is for the Drummond and Cannon Galleon. When it comes to armor, the Chuan has the most pierce armor at 9 versus 6 versus 8. For some reason, the Drummond also has 1 melee armor, but that doesn't really matter all that much most of the time. Moral of the story is, I guess ranged units are going to take a very long time to kill the Chuan, which does matter because this is also an anti-unit ship as well as an anti-building ship. Alright, now when it comes to the attack values, this is where things get a little bit confusing. So the Drummond fires 5 projectiles that deal 8 damage each and have all of that associated bonus damage you see on screen, affecting every one of their projectiles. The Cannon Galleon, meanwhile, fires 1 projectile, has 60 base attack, and then gets the 275 versus buildings and 25 versus siege weapons. The Chuan, it looks here like it does, it fires 10 projectiles that deal 25 damage each, but that's not the case. So let me just demonstrate this to you guys. Alright, so versus buildings and siege weapons, it fires a trebuchet. This trebuchet has 13 range. It says 10 on here, but we'll get to that in a moment. So even though it says it has 10 range and would in theory be getting outranged by this Britain castle with full upgrades, which has 11 range, the Chuan here actually does have 13 range, so it is the same as an unupgraded Cannon Galleon, the non-elite Cannon Galleon, and one more than the Drummond. In practice, this means that unlike the Drummond, the Chuan with Siege Engineers, which isn't available to every Civ, will be able to outrange every single defensive structure, as Teuton castles, Korean keeps, and Turk bombard towers all have 13 range, so you can one-up that with Siege Engineers. I guess, spoiler alert, yes, Siege Engineers does affect this unit, sort of. Now, when it comes to attacking ships and regular units, you can see here, it fires a bunch of arrows. This is where we get the I guess 9 in parentheses here, referring to the 10 arrows that the ship fires. Now, it isn't shown on the card, but this is a set of 10 arrows, each of which will deal 5 damage, 5 pierce damage, which is upgraded by fletching and stuff, as we'll get to in a moment. And each of those arrows will deal 5 anti-ship damage. This is a very relevant statistic because ships tend to have pretty decent pierce armor, so a lot of the overall damage of this unit against warships is going to be coming in the form of bonus damage. So you can see here that if we just attack this galleon, which has no ship armor, you can see we do a lot of damage with one volley. So, what upgrades benefit this weird unit? So, from the siege ship perspective, it is benefited by chemistry, to give it the one extra attack, and then siege engineers, if it is available to your Civ, it is not available to Chinese, but just know that siege engineers does affect it in terms of both giving it 14 range instead of 13, and it gives you extra bonus damage versus buildings. So basically exactly how you would expect siege engineers to affect a siege ship. That only applies to the trebuchet version though, or the trebuchet attack mode. When it comes to the regular attack mode versus units, it is basically like a galley. So you still get +1 attack via chemistry, you are affected by each of fletching, bodkin, and bracer, and then you're also affected by ballistics. As you can see here, I have this ship patrolling back and forth, but now that ballistics is in, it's going to be much, much better at tracking the moving ship. So are you guys confused enough yet? Because don't worry, it never stops with this unit. Still, this is sort of the basic interactions with the unit. You can think of it as arrows versus ships and regular units, trebuchet mode versus siege units here like this Caprams, and buildings, that each have completely different upgrades that benefit them. That said, even if it's confusing on the card, the upgrades still affect what you think they should, right? So the arrow mode is affected basically like all the galley upgrades, and then the siege weapon upgrades apply to the siege ship version. It's just all kind of smashed together on one card, which is not very helpful. All right, now to go over the Civ-specific bonuses here for the Chuan. And as this is an Imperial Age unit, this is going to be at least a little bit easier to cover. So for Chinese, the only Civ you can use the Chuan with right now, they are affected by rocketry. So the rocket cart Scorpions and Chuans have 25% extra attack, and the Chuans fire rockets. So what this means is that, like how rocketry affects the rocket carts, it's plus 25% bonus, plus 25% extra damage to everything. So that includes the bonus damage, and that includes the base attack of the unit. Now you don't get siege engineers, so that kind of cancels out a little bit for like the anti-building effect. But the extra damage versus units is quite helpful. You can see here now that instead of firing arrows, it's firing rockets. And as you can see here, because they're rockets, they're doing a little bit of blast damage. Not very much, but I mean, I guess it's still a little bit helpful. You can see it's affecting several different units here. Yeah, no siege engineers for Chinese. Other than that, they have all the upgrades though. So, of course, dry dock and careening both apply in the same way you'd think they would, as well as shipwright. Shipwright going to be actually pretty darn important for the unit because it does reduce the wood cost from 250 to 200. So yeah, that is the Chinese Chuan. As for the Jurchens, they do get siege engineers in the Castle Age, which is nice, and they have thunderclap bombs. So rocket carts, grenadiers, and Chuans detonate when defeated, and the projectiles produce additional explosions. This changes the Chuans a lot, and I am honestly not entirely sure all of the different ways that this affects the unit. So you do miss dry dock with the Jurchens, so it's not like their late game navy is great. But yeah, check this out. Right here, it says that they're going to have one extra projectile. But when it comes to fighting buildings, look, it fires this fancy new projectile. I don't even know what that is. I guess it's a bomb of some kind. And then it fires its arrows all at once. This might be a bug. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if it's supposed to fire both modes at once. But yeah, as you can see here, it's also getting that secondary explosion as well for all of the arrow projectiles. Now, when facing ships, you still get the trebuchet shot. Like, these Chuans are actually insane for Jurchens. Like, obviously stuff can miss, but I mean, you're basically getting your cake and eating it too with the Jurchens and the additional explosions. It's honestly absolutely insane for the Jurchens, who still don't have a great navy otherwise, but at least their Chuans are redonkulous. All right, for the shoe, you have Careening, Drydock, Shipwright, and Siege Engineers. So you have all the basic upgrades as far as that goes, on top of Bracer, which is actually discounted for the Civ. You also get Siege Weapons and Siege Warships, which is really just Chuans. Move 10% faster in Castle Age. That doesn't matter for the Chuan. You can't train them in Castle Age. So basically, Chuans move 15% faster. You also have the bonus of Bolt Magazine, which includes Chuans firing additional projectiles. Now, this is confusing, especially with another Civ, but you can see here the Chuan is super speedy. This is a very speedy siege warship. 1.52 movement speed with full upgrades. You can see that it's only a little bit slower than even the galleons with dry dock. So that's pretty nice. And it shows a bunch of extra projectiles here. Unfortunately, for the shoe, the extra projectiles only matter for the arrow mode. You can see it's still firing just the one trebuchet rock. But when it comes to fighting the actual regular units, you can see it is getting the extra projectiles, so 3 extra projectiles. And they all deal full damage, so you're getting a nice little DPS increase for the arrow version of the unit. I guess it's not really a version of these units, right? It's just different attack modes they have based on what they're targeting. So yeah, the shoe get extra DPS versus regular units, but not against buildings. Although you do have Siege Engineers, which a lot of these civs don't have, so that's something to keep in mind. Also, for what it's worth, the hero unit auras do not affect ships. You can see this is buffing 0 units. Even though the Chuan is right there, it just wants that HP regen, but it will not get it. So yeah, heroes are only for land units. All right, for the Wei, they do have a Chuan bonus as well. Their Chuans cost minus 25%, which sounds awesome, but then you realize they don't have Shipwright, which is minus 20% wood cost, so the discount, I mean, it's still better than Shipwright as far as the discount goes, but you don't get that extra creation speed, you don't have dry dock with the civilization, and you don't have Siege Engineers. So, yeah, all of that stuff means that your Chuans are going to be pretty below average combat stats-wise, but the 188 wood and 169 gold cost is quite nice, as they say. But yeah, your actual Chuans themselves are not going to be all that great. And again, just to prove it, not improving the attack speed of the Chuans, despite Cao Cao here being right next to him. So that is the Wei bonuses. And lastly, we have the Wu. Now, they get, well, I guess their docks provide 65 food, not directly related to the Chuan, but still nice to have. They also have Careening and Dry Dock available earlier and cheaper, which, again, is nice, but not directly related to the Chuan. They still miss Shipwright, so that's an unfortunate downside to the civilization in the late game. But they also miss Siege Engineers, but their Imperial Age unique tech, Sitting Tiger, does allow their Chuan's trebuchet mode to fire extra projectiles. So you can see here that you've got the main trebuchet projectile and then the extra trebuchet projectiles. But keeping in mind you don't have Siege Engineers, how this compares to all of the other Chuan civs is what we're going to be testing next. And that's going to be a nice segue, as the actual unit tests are going to be next. Alright, before we get into all of the Civ-specific bonuses, let's just break down how the Chuans perform relative to Cannon Galleons and Drummonds. So I switched over here to the Japanese, who don't have Chuans, but if they did have Chuans, they'd have fully upgraded generic Chuans. So this is just a Chuan, no bonuses in play, but all upgrades. And then we have a Saracen Cannon Galleon, which again, generic full upgrades, and the Roman Drummond, which has extra armor, but that doesn't really matter here. So let's see how they compare when it comes to raw building destruction. Keeping in mind that the Chuans on a per unit cost are the most expensive by far, but they're also much easier to tech into than Cannon Galleons. Cannon Galleons will still have the longest range though, at 16 versus 14, which is not displayed here, and then the 13 with Siege Engineers for the Drummond. Anyway, as you can see here, in just a pure anti-building ship, which honestly is the most important role for a unit like the Chuan, it is absolutely blowing these guys out of the water, so to say. The Drummond is definitely a lot worse than is the Cannon Galleon. But yeah, you can see that this is a fully upgraded castle. and it's going down so much faster. And I think in large part this is because of the super fast reload time, literally half the reload time of a Cannon Galleon. So yeah, this was not especially close when it comes to killing units. Alright, now when it comes to fighting units, this is where the Chuan should be performing quite a bit better than the other two siege ships. Of course, the dumb Cannon Galleon is attacking the castle. Whatever. Cannon Galleons still lose to the Galleons one-on-one. Cannon Galleon itself was being unhelpful in demonstrating that, but I'm afraid you guys are just going to have to trust me on this one because I don't feel like redoing all of my triggers. However, although you saw that the Chuan was good against the Galleon, it still lost like half its HP in the straight-up shootout. So although the damage the Chuan deals is quite good, you need to protect it with units up front. They outrange Galleons, so that is going to be fairly easy to do. So fireships and Galleons need to serve as a meat shield here. Now, versus fireships is where things are going to be a big issue. I mean, it's going to be really bad here for the other two siege ships. But you can see here, the Chuan not only has minimum range, but the inherent ship armor in the fireship means that you're really doing 1 damage an arrow. So, I mean, at most you do 10 damage a shot, which is obviously super underwhelming. So fireships, they don't just counter this unit, they counter this unit super hard. So honestly, I think the conclusions that we can draw here are that the damage versus buildings is just better for the Chuan. They are a better anti-building unit, although they don't have the range of the Cannon Galleon. But in terms of sheer DPS, they are unparalleled in that regard. Versus ships, it is going to be a little bit, I guess, particular in terms of what you're up against, but the Chuans are still going to be much better at sort of anti-personnel, anti-ship in that role than are the Cannon Galleons or the Drummonds. Although you have to be careful about the splash damage of these units, whereas you do not have to worry about that with the Drummonds unless you're Chinese. So with all of this in mind, let's see how the different civs Chuans are going to perform against buildings here. I do have the Drummond and the Cannon Galleon here to serve as a bit of a control group. So let's go to town. The Jurchen one, because it's doing the fire arrows that get the extra explosions, plus the explodey rock right there, it should be by far the best. The Wu one should also be pretty good as well, although we have to see how much missing siege engineers hurts. The Wei one's probably not that great because you don't have siege engineers, although remember it is cheaper. You have the extra damage from the Chinese one, and although the Shu one moves faster against buildings, it is just pretty generic with siege engineers. But yeah, the degree to which the Jurchen Chuan is performing well, I think, is honestly evidence that it's a bug and it shouldn't be firing all of its projectiles every single time. That feels a little bit confusing, or a little too good, I suppose. Anyway, again, that's sort of the generic Chuan. You can see that the Chinese one should be doing slightly better because it essentially gets 5% more bonus damage against buildings. So it basically takes the buildings out in 2 fewer hits. Meanwhile, the Wu one, the extra Treb projectiles are nice, but you can see that it's basically, like, Siege Engineers is just as good, if not even slightly better than the extra Treb projectiles you get for the Wu Chuan. So 3 Treb shots, much less scary than it sounds. Anyway, you can see that even the semi-underwhelming Chuan here is still doing better than the Cannon Galleon and the Drummond. Although, of course, again, keeping in mind it is a very expensive unit still. Although cheaper to get going. I mean, if you add in the cost of Cannon Galleons, this still feels like a win for the Chuan. Like, cost of researching Cannon Galleon. Anyway, this is how all of the different civs are going to stack up versus buildings. Alright, before I get into the anti-unit testing, I do want to briefly mention a bug another bug that I think exists with Jurchen Chuans, which is, you can see right here, the range says 13+1, which is the trebuchet range, whereas it shows the arrow range for the other ships. Now, it still should have 14 range versus the 14 range here for the Shu, because remember, Shu have siege engineers as well. So these two ships should have the same range. That said, if you do a comparison here, it looks like the Shu one doesn't have... Oh, whoops, I forgot to make them enemies. All right, let's try that again. So yeah, you can see the Shu one still doesn't have the range of the Jurchen one. It has to sail a little bit closer. I mean, it has the faster movement speed, but yeah, I really don't know what's going on here with the Jurchens. They're both supposed to have 14 range. I do know that for a fact, but clearly there's some weird stuff happening, I think, especially with Thunderclap bombs or whatever the Jurchen unique tech is called. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so one of the important tests I want to do is versus bombard cannons, because bombard cannon versus siege chip is a very common matchup. So let's just start here. As you can see, Cannon Galleons, one-shot bombard cannons. Drummonds, two-shot bombard cannons. So let's see how the Chuans will do by comparison. Also, again, Cannon Galleons have the most range, so they can more easily snipe the bombards. Alright, for the siege ships themselves, you can see already, I guess I can just show you here, the Chuans do not do very well versus bombards. Now, with Chinese, with the extra attack, you are still able to two-shot them, but if I just go over here to the Wei, you'll see right here, look. Shot there. It doesn't even two-shot it. So despite that extra trebuchet shot looking like it should be very good against bombard cannons, it's really not. We'll switch over here to the Wu. And yeah, the extra treb projectiles don't really do all that much. So honestly, a little bit underwhelming. As far as like an anti-siege unit goes. They honestly might even be better off with firing their regular arrows. Maybe not. The arrows have really low base attack. I don't know. It feels like both Drummonds with their area attack and maneuverability and Cannon Galleons with their sheer damage and range are both better anti-siege units. And this will apply to onagers as well as trebuchets too. So something I think that's really important to keep in mind. All right, now let's just use these champions here as a stand-in for regular units. So which of these ships will destroy the blob of good old champions first? Now, we should imagine that it's going to be Chuans with the thunderclap bombs. As again, that's just pretty insane. Yeah, I'm curious about these champions and like how the Chuan arrows perform. So the Wu one is going to be pretty generic and should be exactly the same here as the Wei one. The Shu one gets the extra projectiles, remember. But you can see here that the base attack is very low. Like, champions have pretty average armor for an Imperial Age unit. 6 pierce armor. And the shots only have, what, 8? 9. 9 attack. So it's the same attack as a crossbowman, with full upgrades. Now, Cannon Galleons obviously are not very good anti-unit units. You can see that Thunderclap Bombs did its job. The Chinese bonus damage is definitely helpful here, with the rockets as well getting that little bit of blast damage. But unless you're Jurchens or Chinese, the actual strength of these units against other units is not that high. You can see here that a Drummond is, of course, it didn't move forward to attack. The Drummond is not as, the Drummond is better than the Chuan in terms of anti-unit, unless it is Chinese or Jurchens. The Chinese or Jurchen ones are very, very good. The Shu one isn't that bad. But again, if you're looking for a ship that's really good against units, you're better off with Drummonds, these two Chuans, Chinese and Jurchens, or Spanish Cannon Galleons, basically. I mean, especially for the unit being so expensive, it's really not that exciting. Alrighty, guys, so just a few more tests here for the Chuan. We already established that, yes, their DPS is higher than the Drummond or Cannon Galleon versus individual ships. Although they are quite vulnerable and need that meat shield. But what about a group of ships? Because we know that ships stack up a lot in the late game. So let's just see how they compare. These Galleons are on no attack stance, so we just want to see here the raw damage that's being dealt. Alright, we can't anticipate that Thunderclap Bombs is still probably bugged. The Drummond especially I was curious about because it deals all that blast damage. The Cannon Galleon still probably shouldn't be all that great. I mean, Shu's is definitely decent. Yeah, you can see here Shu's, like, the anti-ship DPS, like, versus these Galleons is really, really nice. Even better than Chinese. Although, again, nothing beats the almighty Thunderclap Bombs. Okay, so, like, as an anti-Galleon support unit, this is huge for Shu. But keep in mind, though, that's still going to be really bad against fire ships. And if we repeated this test with fire ships, guys, it would basically be the Chuans dealing, you know, basically nothing, except maybe the Jurchen ones, and then the Cannon Galleon and Drummond blowing them all up. But yeah, I mean, the damage is still definitely a lot better for the Chuans as a support warship, especially the Shu, but Drummonds are still pretty good in that role as well. I figured I might as well show off the fire ships anyway. But yeah, this should be all Drummond, as the Chuans are just so bad here. Yeah, I mean, we're not even close to killing one fire ship yet. Jeez. Unless you have thunderclap bombs, then you're doing all right for yourself. Moral of the story: thunderclap bomb Chuans are probably like the best ship in the game. But yeah, this is definitely where the Drummond is going to be at its best, dealing that nice melee damage that like you don't even have any anti-ship bonus damage. It's just all in the melee damage here. So fire ships have no melee damage, or no melee armor rather. Okay, well the Drummond's helping out the Cannon Galleon here. Look at this! This Luchwan is like, oh, I'm already done. What are you guys doing being slowpokes? I'm just gonna go blow up all your ships too. Oh man. It is pretty awesome looking, I gotta say. Alright guys, so thoughts here on the Luchwan. It's kind of interesting. It's really confusing, and I hope they implement a better way of showing the different attacks. But, I mean, it's an expensive unit. It's a very expensive unit. But in terms of, like, raw building destroying power, it really is, like, the best of the best. And I think that at its core, the role of a siege ship is just being able to destroy castles and whatnot faster than all of the other ships. So that is where the Luchwan is at its best. It's also a very nice support unit with a galleon meat shield or a fire ship meat shield, especially against galleons. But man, are these guys countered by fire ships super hard. Whereas the Drummonds and the Cannon Galleons will at least deal decent damage to them because they have melee attack. But yeah, the pierce damage of the Drummonds combined with their low anti-ship damage means that anything that has ship armor is not going to take much damage at all. So that not only includes fire ships, but also turtle ships and Therosadai as well. Now, caravels and longboats are both with no ship armor, so they are both going to die to the Luchwan as well. So it's a little bit situational, but the fact that you can get this raw anti-building damage power as soon as you hit Imperial Age is going to make that early imp transition of these naval civs that get the Luchwan really insane. Like, you just hit imp, you pop one of those guys out, and it's going to be so hard to keep a castle alive. So yeah, overall, strong ship, especially against buildings, situationally useful versus units. Not that great versus siege, though, but still very expensive and very vulnerable to enemy fire ships. Anyway, guys, that was the testing for the Luchwan. Hope you all enjoyed. Next up, I will start to go into the specific civilization. So I'm going to do Jurchens and Ketons, and then I'm going to go over the Three Kingdoms Civ regional units, and then I'm going to do the Three Kingdoms. So that's the plan right now, guys. But, of course, thank you to my Patreon supporters with Dan and Jared in the Great Wolf tier, and then Carolyn Dieter, Liquid Egg Product, Rairu, and Tanduri in the Dire Wolf tier. Thank you guys all so much. These videos do take a fair bit of time to make. So, really appreciate the support, and I'll see you guys next time.